Our format today is we are simply going to begin with Secretary Kelly Schultz. She'll be talking about Department of Commerce as well as the governor's efforts to help and support the small business community, which I think they've done, personally, I believe they've done a tremendous job. We will take questions and answers for Secretary Schultz, and then we'll move on to the SBA. Rachel Howard will be speaking on behalf of Steve Umberger and be speaking about the SBA services and support, EIDL, PPP, other opportunities for small businesses. And we'll conclude with Mark Sosnowski. He will be, he's with Howard Bank, and he will be talking about not just building a relationship with your banker, your lender, but how the SBA lenders are partnering up with small businesses and the help that they can provide. So that's a brief overview of what we will be doing. One of the reasons I do love to hear Secretary Schultz speak is I love that she's a Hood College graduate. I admire, she was a small business owner and she was engaged in the small business community. She knows the local chambers. She knows the walk we all walk as small business owners. And she takes that, lends that expertise and experience, and has worked diligently with the Department of Commerce. And she comes in, and then COVID hits. And as we all have done, it's the ability to rise up to the challenge, to have an active ear, listening, and then working in tandem with so many task force and the governor to bring support to the small business community. So Secretary Schultz, you made such a presence last year at a time when we need you. Glad to know you're still here. And I'm going to turn the program over to you today. And thank you again for being here.
Oh, Angie, you are so kind. I appreciate those wonderful words. And I think that we have learned throughout the past 10 months, going on 12 months, it seems 12 years, we kind of feel at this point in time, that nothing is more important to us at this point than all of our stakeholders and the collaboration moving forward. So my heartfelt thanks to you and everybody else on the call for really wanting to be a part of the conversation and the solution. And I think what I'd like to do today is just to give an overview of where things are in Maryland and where we stand in terms of COVID, the vaccination plans, business relief plans, what we're doing at the Department of Commerce, and overall what Governor Hogan is planning and putting forth for all of us. So Governor Hogan announced plans last week for 6 mass vaccination sites across Maryland, as well as an expansion of the state's partnership with pharmacy chains to provide vaccines. We will have vaccination sites at Six Flags in Prince George's County and the Baltimore Convention Center in Baltimore City, operating by February 5th. M&T Bank Stadium will be another site, and we're finalizing plans for sites in Southern Maryland, Western Maryland, and on the Eastern Shore. So we're looking at these 6 sites to give access to the general public when that time comes. Vaccinations will also begin next week at Safeway and Rite Aid pharmacies. They are already underway, as you may know, at Walmart, Giant, and Martin's locations. So far, Maryland has received $216 million in FEMA funds in order to assist vaccinations, and the governor has expanded the mission of the Maryland National Guard to support vaccination operations. The speed at which vaccines are being given in Maryland is increasing, thankfully. Our 7-day average as of last week was more than 18,000 doses administered, which is a 54% increase over where we were 2 weeks ago. I mention this because vaccination is obviously the key to permanent, long-term economic recovery. As long as people are wary of going out, of going shopping, of doing business the way that they used to, our businesses will still be hurting. Maryland has thus far weathered the economic impact of the pandemic, honestly, better than most states. Our unemployment rate ended the year at 6.3%. which is down from a high of a little over 10% in April. At the peak, it was 10.1%. Through the end of 2020, we regained 250,700 jobs, or 65% of the nearly 390,000 jobs that were lost at the beginning of the pandemic. That recovery is the best in the Mid-Atlantic region. Our business relief efforts, such as grants and tax relief, are important, but they're not the permanent fix that we need. That will only come when the virus is behind us once and for all. Meanwhile, we are continuing to provide economic relief for businesses and individual Marylanders and working with our partners in the Maryland General Assembly to increase that support in the coming months. From the very start of the pandemic, Governor Hogan, the Department of Commerce team, and honestly, our partnering agencies have been committed to supporting Maryland's business community and keeping our economy strong until we beat COVID-19 once and for all. We provided hundreds of millions of dollars to support small businesses, nonprofit organizations, manufacturers producing PPE, artists and arts organizations, and tourism organizations. Our business community is diverse and varied, and that's what gives it strength. So we've tried to provide targeted assistance where it will have the greatest impact. So some highlights of that are $220 million in grants and loan funds for small businesses, $5 million to support manufacturers so they could start or accelerate producing PPE, $10 million for additional loans for our BBB program to help economically disadvantaged businesses and entrepreneurs. We provided $7 million in emergency arts funding through the Maryland State Arts Council and additional $2 million to our tourism DMOs, or our destination marketing offices. More recently, we have given $80 million to the counties for direct relief to the restaurants in their area. And we're in the process of getting $50 million to the counties for the hotel and lodging businesses in their area. Thus far, Maryland has provided more than $700 million in economic relief. Last week, I was part of a team testifying in Annapolis in support of Senate Bill 496, the $1 billion Relief Act proposed by the governor. And I want to tell you a little bit what's included in his proposal. There is a direct stimulus payment to low to moderate income Marylanders, up to 4 months of sales tax credits for small businesses, very important, codifying an emergency order, staving off any sudden unemployment tax hikes for businesses for the remainder of the year. It repeals all state and local income taxes on unemployment benefits, and it prevents Maryland businesses from being hit with tax increases because they accepted emergency COVID-19 grant or loan funds from the state. The sales tax relief for small businesses will allow more than 55,000 small businesses in the state to take that money and apply it directly to payroll and other essential operations costs. The more we can do to keep businesses afloat during this very difficult time, the less ground Maryland will have to make up as the pandemic subsides and the economy continues to recover. We think it's better for the state to forego some tax revenues now, so we're not asking our businesses and entrepreneurs to start over from scratch if their businesses are forced to shut down. Next, I want to mention the protection for businesses who have received grants and loans from the state. This is very important, and Governor Hogan announced last month that Maryland would forgive the $75 million in small business emergency relief loans. Since those are now grants, Senate Bill 496 would prevent those businesses from seeing their taxes increase as a result. The goal of our grant program was for the money to go to the businesses for their needs, not for the money to come back to the state through taxes. That was not the purpose. This bill will make sure businesses keep their relief funds as we intended. A related provision in this bill will make a change to our BBB program that will allow forgiveness of the COVID-19 emergency loans provided by that entity as well, so that they can also be converted to grants. As I noted a moment ago, Governor Hogan provided $10 million to BBB for additional loans to businesses impacted by the pandemic, and we want to make sure they can have the forgiveness that our other loan applicants received. On Wednesday of this past week, a week ago today, Senate Democrats in Annapolis unveiled their own companion economic relief proposal, which they will also be considering. We hope they will pass the Relief Act as written, but at the very least, there is broad agreement in Annapolis on both sides of the aisle and from both the governor and the legislature that more needs to be done. Exactly what that's going to look like as it continues through the legislative process, we will wait to see, but I just want everybody to know that there is very active communications, and the understanding of the needs of this community is heard loud and clear, and we intend to be able to continue to support and to help. And Angie, I want to thank you for having me here today to do a little bit of this conversation. And I, of course, am happy to take any questions from the business community that they may have.
Thank you so much. This is your time to have a one-to-one to ask questions that you might have as a business owner. So the floor is open to anyone if you have some questions before Secretary Schultz departs.
This is Deborah. May I ask a question?
Yes, please, Deborah.
Yes, good morning, all. My question is in reference to the PPP forgiveness for the first round. I do understand that anyone who received less than $150,000 in payroll PPP would automatically be forgiven. Are we expecting, how can we verify, is there a need to verify forgiveness? Or in terms of what kind of verification will small businesses get that their loans have been forgiven? Or do we just automatically make the adjustments in our balance sheets to reflect that it is no longer a debt?
Sure. Well, I think that I will try to answer that question. I think SBA may have a better response for you with that due to the fact that the PPP program is a federal program, and their forgiveness and what they're doing on the tax front will be through them. So I just want to state for the record what the bill does for that we have in the legislature, the governor's bill, the Relief Act, is focused on, at this point in time, state relief for state taxes from the state programs that were initiated through our programs within the state agencies. So I'm going to defer to SBA as to what that would look like.
Okay, duly noted. Thank you.
Sure.
And Deborah, we have SBA coming up next, so Rachel can address your question, but does anyone have any questions specific to anything that our great state is doing to support us as small business owners?
I have a question.
Yes, please. Elizabeth?
Yeah, so we got the grant money, but my question is, are you guys going to be implementing like an ACH like program? Because it took almost a month and a half for us to receive the check with the current postal situation. So I know for like future businesses, I mean that like we needed the money a month ago, so we had to pretty much pull other funds from other places and pull other loans just to get by during that time.
Yeah, Elizabeth, that's a great question. And we're always looking for new ways to improve the system. Since March 23rd, when we started the Grant and Relief Program, we were the first state in the nation to put together a relief fund for businesses. With that understanding, and within a very short period of time, that the Department of Commerce was not able to quickly manage a program with 30,000 applications that had come in within a week or so for those programs. So we had to build an entire new system in order to be able to process and go through with the distribution of that. Obviously, there were many challenges along the way. I think right now we do have a system that is, I'm not going to say foolproof, but I would say that it's further advanced. I'm not exactly sure when you received your funds, but you may have realized that we switched to the state government is now in the DocuSign business, and we had to look for any available opportunity to digitize, because we also were working remotely, and that seemed to help immensely to be able to get people enrolled in grant agreements out in a more rapid fashion. We work through, we don't actually send the checks from the Department of Commerce. They are actually distributed through the comptroller and the state treasury. So switching to online payments would have to be done with those state entities as opposed to the Department of Commerce. So I know that's a very long story, but we will see. What we have found, quite frankly, especially with the United States Postal Service, with the delays that they have had, especially during the holiday season, that we have to work locally as well, which is the main reason that the $80 million of restaurant funds and the $50 million of hotel lodging, we are granting those funds proportionately to the counties so that they can distribute. We found that, it's obviously much faster for those types of applications and money to be dispersed from 24 entities as opposed to one entity at the Department of Commerce. So we did switch to that for those two very specific industry groups. And depending on how the Relief Act, what the final proposal looks like and what gets passed from the legislature, it is an emergency legislation, so it will take effect as soon as it gets passed and the governor signs it into law. We will have to make sure that those conversations are had with the legislature about what their intentions are as far as the distribution and the timeliness. And so those are the conversations that we're having now.
Okay, yeah, because I was fine with the whole application process. It's just that it was in mail transit for a month and a half. So that was
I know.
Yeah, because
Is anybody else still receiving Christmas cards? Because I'm still receiving Christmas cards. It took 10 days for a Christmas card to be delivered from Frederick to Frederick. So I think we're all in the same boat there.
Muted, of course. So Secretary Schultz, thank you so much for your time this morning. What a great way to start our day. And we hope to keep hearing from you, your communications out to the state, the governor's press conferences, all of those things have really helped us to stay in the know. And we look forward to hearing more from you and hopefully continue with all this great news. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Angie, and to everybody on the call. Rachel, good to see you. Mark, I'm going to stay on just to listen because, I can insert emails and listen to you guys present at the same time. I always learn something new. So Thanks so much.
Well, thank you. Well, next, I'm honored to introduce to you, Rachel and I have realized we've known each other longer than we've been alive because we are such young whippersnappers. But Rachel Howard is the Public Information Officer, Economic Development Specialist for the Baltimore region of the Small Business Administration. And one of the things I love knowing about Rachel is her heart is so much with small business community. She worked at small business development centers. I think that's what they're called. Yeah. And has always been there to support the small business community. So Rachel is going to tell us today, as we all know, the second round of PPP, the application is out. Then people are also trying to figure out, what do I do about the first round? So there's a lot going on. And it's always a good time to remind everyone, this is my BBB plug, that also if you get emails, text messages, all of those things that appears to be from the state or the federal government, SBA, different things, please verify that indeed that's who it's from, to make sure that you don't become a victim of any type of malware being released by clicking on scammers links. And that's one of the trends we've seen this year to share with everybody, and of course, is that we've had so many business owners fall victim to scams because we are expecting these communications from our lenders, the federal government, the state government, and we click on links, we answer, we give so much information away. And so that's my BBB plug, and I will be quiet and turn the program over to you, Rachel. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Angie and Clay and Joanne, for having us. We're really glad to be a part of today's presentation and always appreciate getting to share some information. I know it's a very confusing and difficult time for everyone, and certainly thank you to Secretary Schultz and her team at Commerce. And Mark, as you'll learn as I go through my slides here shortly, we rely quite heavily on our lending partners, and certainly Howard Bank is a valued member of that network for us. It is very confusing between state and federal, and I think the Secretary would agree that we all play nicely together. We all work well together, and are more than happy to do whatever it takes to get the small business owner in the right place and what they need. So I'm just going to take a quick second, just in case. I know SBA, before last year, there may have been some people that had never heard of us or didn't really know or understand what we did. So just very briefly, we are the federal government, one of the smallest federal agencies. We do have offices across the country. I am representing the Baltimore office. So we do serve the entire state of Maryland with the exception of PG and Montgomery. Those folks are serviced by our counterparts out of the Washington district office. So again, representation across the state. And really our whole purpose in life is to help people start and grow their small businesses. And we are also tasked with serving as the nation's bank in times of disaster. So that is the only time that we would do direct lending, and we're going to touch on our disaster loan program here in a minute. So Paycheck Protection really was created last year. It was a brand new program. I think within the span of less than 2 weeks, we created a program and had it up and running, which is truly unheard of. So for those of you that rode that roller coaster with us last year, Mark included, please, we appreciate your patience and certainly for hanging in there with us. If we can go ahead to the next slide, please. And this is just, we'll kind of go where we are, which is kind of where I'm at right now. We're going to touch on first draw, second draw. We'll touch on the forgiveness. I believe it was Deborah had that question, which hopefully we'll answer. If not, we'll circle back. And I slipped in idle here, the disaster loan, and then we can kind of move on to additional resources. So one more, please. On the slides. Yep, thank you. So again, the Paycheck Protection Program was a brand new program designed specifically to get workers working, keep the small businesses up and running, and keep the employees on the payroll. So in terms of the scope of the program, last year, well, collectively, the Paycheck Program to date has provided over 6 million loans valued at a total of $595 billion. So we had over 5,000 lenders across the country that worked with us. Again, SBA relies on our resource partners to do the applications and fund these loans. In Maryland alone, we were able last year to provide over 14,000 loans at over 1.4 billion. Quite a lot of money flowing through. Currently, the new version, the legislation that was signed in late December, I believe it was the 27th, brought back the CARES program that we're going to talk about today, sort of the newest version of it. And in the first 20 days of the program so far, we've done 891,000 loans, again, across the country, and we're at over $72 billion. About 68% of those loans are under 50,000, and the average loan size right now is running at about 82,000. So again, the money is getting out there. We did have a staggered launch, let's call it, of the program this time around. The intent with the newest legislation was to improve the flow of these loans to women, minorities, veterans. And again, we pulled in and placed a great emphasis on our community development financial institutions, the minority development financial institutions, both working directly with them and then also enhancing enhancing our lender match platform, which we'll get to. It's a function on our SBA website where you can identify lenders, kind of bringing those organizations to the front. So as of right now, all lenders are able to submit. We've gotten through that sort of staggered launch period. And again, as we talked about, you'll see, you know, that the loans are certainly getting done. Again, asking for patience, you know, sort of going back to that thought from last year. We're going a little slower this time around. I think some of you that may have already been talking with your lender maybe have already experienced that, just sort of taking a breath, making sure we have our checks and balances. The money is there. Certainly there is the potential for funding to run out, but we're quite confident that the money is going to last through this phase, and we're just going to take a breath, you know, before it was a little quicker in getting a loan number assigned. So just a couple extra days in the middle, but it's still a very quick process. I think all would agree on that one. And I think we'll go on to the next slide. So this time around, we're calling first draw and second draw. And first draw is basically what it implies. This would be for a first-time borrower, anyone who did not receive a Paycheck Protection loan last year. Last year, we ended on, I thought it was the 8th. This says August the 9th. So if you did not get a loan last year, this would be considered your first draw. And what we've done is we've expanded the eligibility this time around. There are quite a few more organizational types that are eligible. Covered expenses have been expanded. And one of the other features was that the borrowers can now select their covered period for their payroll. So originally when the program came out, there was a fixed 8-week assessment, and that was based, you know, for your loan. Now you have the option of selecting anywhere between 8 and 24 weeks. So again, just really trying to provide greater flexibility. We also, with this new program, it does also give more flexibility to seasonal employers. There were quite a few questions and situations last year. You know, again, with the timing of COVID and the shutdowns, seasonal employees, there were a lot of questions surrounding that. So that's been opened up and a little more flexible. The key and most important thing I think at the moment for everyone to know is that March 31st is the deadline. And that is regardless of whether it is your first time or if you're coming back for a second draw. So again, March 31st is our big number to keep an eye on right there. And if we'll go on to the next slide, please. So the first draw, as you'll see, I mentioned that it's newly eligible. In any case, no matter which category you fall into, you do need to follow the standards, the NAICS code standards for size standards, truly to be classified as a small business. So we've opened it up now, as you'll see here, the housing cooperatives. I know the secretary and Angie, I believe, had both mentioned destination marketing organizations, chambers of commerce. All of that is new this time around. So again, trying to open the options up, you know, for some additional organizations there. Still eligible would be the business entities themselves, whether that's a partnership, corporation, LLC. Lots of questions last year, you know, between state programs, our programs, you know, the counties. For Paycheck Protection Program, you'll see here that sole proprietors, independent contractors, and the self-employed are all eligible. So all of those folks can apply for the Paycheck Program. And here, carrying over from the first version, still the 501c3s, veterans organizations, and not too many tribal organizations in our area, but they are still eligible. So we'll go on through. So second draw, again, this would be for someone who received a loan last year, the Paycheck Protection loan. They got it last year before that August cutoff. They have to have 300 or less employees, and you must show that you have suffered a 25% reduction in gross receipts. So a couple extra little checkpoints here on this version. You'll see here that the majority of borrowers, the maximum amount of their loan is going to be calculated at 2.5 times their monthly payroll. Now, this version 2021, it can be based on 2019 or 2020 payroll costs. So again, there's some added flexibility there. In any case, the loan is going to max out at $2 million regardless. We do have, again, changed for 2021. Certainly, we all know that hospitality, food services, restaurants have been hit particularly hard. So all of those folks are generally going to start with the 72 NAICS code. And in that case, the 2021 version now allows for the second draw applicants in those particular codes, the 72 series, they get to count 3.5 times their average monthly payroll. And again, that can be based on 2019 or 2020. And again, the cap is still $2 million. There is a second draw form separate from the original paycheck form. And again, those are all things that the lender would provide to you. So let's go one more, please. Next slide. Very much what we just talked about. But again, for a second draw, you have to have gotten the first one. And so you'll see here that you are only eligible for this second draw if all of the funds from your original loan have been dispersed or will be used. So you will work with your lender, you'll make that certification, proving that you need that, this second round of funding, you've exhausted those original funds. Again, in this case, you'll have no more than 300 employees. The first draw goes up to 500 employees, but for second draw, there is a cap at 300 employees. And again, you are going to have to demonstrate that 25% reduction in the gross receipts. Now, it's comparable quarters. So again, we talked about payroll being 2019 or 2020. Again, here with this gross receipt proving this reduction, it can be any quarter you pick. So you can do third quarter 2019 versus third quarter 2020, but you can't do second quarter 2019, fourth quarter 2020. So as long as they match, you're in good shape. Again, you get to pick the quarter, but it has to be the same quarter for each of those years. And I think we'll go on one more. We'll talk about our forgiveness. So forgiveness, clearly, again, the loans, if they were spent appropriately according to the rules of the program, the loan would be forgiven. And I guess we don't have a slide, so I'll just talk to that piece of this. The 60% of the loan proceeds must be spent on payroll. So the remaining funds can be spent on the allowable expenses, which would be, rent, utilities. It's a very pretty generous list that, again, the lender can work with you to identify. So the new thing for this year, again, is that they have bullet number 3, sorry, jumping ahead, expanded forgiveness expenses. So the new piece of that would simply be your, let's call it safety measures to accommodate, to COVID. So whether you've had to buy plexiglass, install barriers, whatever it may be that you've had to physically change your business operations to accommodate and to be in line with the mandates. It also covers personal protective equipment. So if you've had to get the PPE, to keep your employees safe, your customers, whatever it may be, all of those are now allowable expenses. One of the biggest things that I can't stress enough for folks is that the idle advances that would have been the economic injury disaster loan, if you had applied for that last year and you got an advance that would have maxed out at $10,000, originally that amount of your advance would have been deducted from your paycheck forgiveness. That is no longer the case. So the advance amount goes goodbye. So that is really important, and I do believe a huge relief for the entrepreneurs. So I'm happy to report that that is part of the new program. And you'll see here that the forgiven PPP loans are not taxable income. The expenses paid with the funds are now tax deductible. And again, you can work with the IRS, certainly consult your tax professionals on those details. We covered the expanded forgivable expenses. Coming soon, we're working on the simplified forgiveness applications, and I'll just cover it now. in reference to the forgiveness and kind of how does that happen, it is a simplified process, but regardless of where your loan falls under 50,000, the 50 to 150 range or higher, you are still going to need to work with your lender. There is still a certification that has to be done. Depending on the level of the loan, it may be a self-certification where you're just testifying to the fact that, it was spent correctly and that you were in compliance. But in any case, there is a form, regardless of your loan size, that will need to be filed. And again, that's something that you're going to work with your lender to file that paperwork, and then you would be getting direct notifications. The other important thing I'll throw out is that it is a requirement that you do need to keep your payroll records for 4 years. So regardless, again, of your loan level or your forgiveness, you are going to need to keep those payroll records. So make sure your record keeping is up to date and you're staying on top of that as you go through this. Just had a thought and I lost it, so we'll come back to it. Actually, no, sorry, I'm back. It's early. The forgiveness, again, the loan will be forgiven if the 60% of the proceeds were spent on the payroll. Again, those are things that the lenders can work with you. Insurance and other compensations, leave and things like that are included as part of the payroll expense. But let's say that for whatever reason you missed the mark on the 60% and you're just a little short. The loan will be forgiven, but at a reduced amount. So it's not all or none. There is a formula that will be assessed where the forgiveness would just be reduced. So if you do have a balance remaining for whatever reason it may be, that balance will convert, to the traditional loan, and the interest is 1%. Loans currently are running at a 5-year maturity. If you had gotten your loan prior to June 5th of last year, it would have a 2-year maturity. So again, these are all things certainly that the lender can advise you on. As you'll notice, I keep saying lender, lender, lender. And as I said, we really do rely on our lending partners such as Howard Bank to really get the money out and to work with you. So we always do suggest that you start with your existing banking relationship. But again, we talked about lender match, which if we can go to the next slide, please. You'll see here on the left-hand side, the middle there is sba.gov/lender match. If for any reason you do need to identify a lender, certainly you can go in there. You'll just pull that up, pop in your zip code, and it'll generate the list nearest to farthest of folks that are in your area. And again, we had well over 5,000 lenders across the country working with us. Community banks, the national banks, again, the minority and community development institutions, as well as many of the online lenders. So there's quite a vast list. You'll see here also sba.gov/PPP. Again, you can have links through our site or through the treasury.gov site, giving you the different procedural notices and interim final rules, things of that nature, the guidelines. But truly your lender is your best source of information. Certainly they know you, they know your business. And I have counterparts in my office that work with them on a regular basis. And they know how to get in touch with us or the main processing for issues that may arise. Certainly additional resources, we've discussed here that our sba.gov website is just a huge resource there. This is our main phone number here, the 410-962-6195. General emails can come into the office and then we'll get them to the right person, and that's simply Baltimore_DO@sba.gov. And then we're going to move on. The next slide, I am going to just take a few minutes and talk about our economic injury disaster loan. Again, I mentioned earlier that the SBA serves as the nation's bank in the times of disaster. So hurricanes, the wildfires, flooding, whatever it may be. Those, many people think it's a FEMA loan, but it truly is an SBA loan. So that is the only time that SBA does do direct lending. In every other case, again, we would rely on that lending, our financial partner network. So for the economic injury disaster loan, many people may have applied for this last year. It's simply sba.gov/disaster. And we'll move on to the next slide, it is simply a low interest long-term loan. And again, this was just trying to kind of bridge the gap and help folks that have suffered losses through the COVID-19 pandemic. So the program was extended, again, with the new legislation that was signed. All Maryland businesses are eligible simply based on the pandemic. And the deadline now has been extended through December 31st of this year. Again, if that's something you might want to consider, I would encourage you to go ahead and look at it now. And go ahead and get your application in. It's very much simplified, very similar to a lot of the other online lending platforms, so a quick and easy process. When you go in, it will ask you for financial institution information because everything is done as a direct deposit. But again, as Angie mentioned, please do be careful and watch your URLs, watch any emails, correspondences that do come in. Anything from us would be an official @sba.gov email. Unfortunately, there are some less than friendly folks out there that are taking advantage, unfortunately, as Angie had mentioned. So again, please just be careful with those emails, watch for the phishing scams. We'll move on to the next one, please. Again, this is just going to be sba.gov/disaster. Unfortunately, at the local offices, we do not have access to that database. So we are not able to check status for you or answer any questions. But the team is doing a really great job keeping up with things and processing those applications. So if you do have questions about EIDL, whether it's one that was, last year, you've already gotten it, or you're waiting on an approval, or questions, leading into this year, disaster customer service at sba.gov, or certainly their main number there, 800-659-2955. And I'll just leave that up for a second, and then we can switch to the next slide. But another huge piece of what we do just on a daily basis, one of our main programs is counseling and training. And as Angie had mentioned earlier, we do have the Small Business Development Center and SCORE and the Women's Business Center that all offer free counseling. I'm happy to report that everybody is up and running at full operation. So in the past, you would have sat down and had that one-on-one, but now, much as we all are, they're doing Zoom calls, video calls, doing their counseling that way. If we can go ahead to the next slide. It'll give you the list here. Again, these are all SBA official resource partners. They do offer free services in terms of the counseling. They do have training. Training at times will have a small fee associated with it, but again, very reasonable in comparison, to some of the other programs out there. And the counselor can help you with anything from that light bulb moment if you're just getting started, on through the business plan. They can work with you on your projections. A lot of times if you're seeking, traditional financing, it would be a good idea to sit with them. The lender is going to want to see the business plan. So it's nice to have somebody to kind of double check you, make sure things are in the right order, save you a little bit of time. And again, marketing, bookkeeping, human resources, whatever it may be, they really have a wide variety of things that they can help you with. So you'll see here, we do have the 4 main groups of the resource partners. SCORE is typically a volunteer organization. Many are retired, but not always. SCORE.org, again, you'll type in your zip code and it'll generate the nearest center to you. The Maryland Small Business Development Center, or we call it the SBDC, government, lots of acronyms. So again, the SBDC is available to you. And you'll see as you move through this list, there is representation for every county. So you shouldn't have to travel too far to find somebody. I guess with Zoom now, you don't have to go anywhere. And then we do also have the Women's Business Centers. We were really excited to be able to bring this program back to Maryland. And currently we have 3 centers operating. The Baltimore Metro Center, our partner there is Morgan State University, is the host for that center. Maryland Capital Enterprises is on the Eastern Shore, and then the Maryland WBC is in Rockville, but they do service the Frederick area as well. And if we have any veteran business owners with us today, certainly thank you for your service. And we do have a special center that focuses their efforts on veterans and some of the issues specific to veterans as they've transitioned back into civilian life and entrepreneurship. That is a Northern Virginia number, but that office does service our Maryland Maryland area, and they do have representatives here. And I do believe that is all I have. So I will be quiet, and I'm happy to take questions now, or if you want Mark to go first and we can tag team it, whatever you would like to do.
Rachel, we do have a question. So before we move to Mark, as a SBA lender expert representing Howard Bank, I'd love to ask this question. And this began early in your presentation. And the question is, are you saying that the EIDL loans qualify for forgiveness? Should the SBA be contacted in regards to confirming forgiveness of the EIDL loan? So I know what point the presentation, this question came from.
Okay, we have apples and oranges, and we'll throw in a lemon. So the Paycheck Protection Program, the original piece that we started with that is designed and geared toward payroll, and the 60% is spent toward payroll, that, you know, qualifies for your forgiveness. Then we have the economic injury disaster loan, the EIDL loan. The piece of the EIDL loan, we'll call that the clementine. Lemons is bad. So we'll say the clementine, not the big orange, the baby. So the advance is what you would have gotten. That would have been an amount up to $10,000. Ideally, it would have been $1,000 per employee. That was really the way that was estimated. So let's pretend you got $5,000. Originally, that $5,000 would have been deducted from your paycheck forgiveness eligibility. So you got your paycheck, you spent everything the right way, it should have all been forgiven, but that would not have been the case had you taken the advance. You would have had a remaining balance of, in this example, the $5,000 at 1%, depending on when you got the loan, you know, 2 or 5 years. So what has happened, the advance, the up to $10,000, whether it was 1,000, 10,000, doesn't matter. The advance is truly a grant. It is no longer held against you or against that balance in terms of forgiveness. So the EIDL loan itself is still in full operation. That is still a loan. Now, there is not a prepayment penalty. If for any reason you choose to return those funds, pay it back early, that is certainly an option to you, but that is a loan that will not be forgiven. There is no indication that we have that that is going to be forgiven. That will stay as the loan. I hope that answers it.
Tia, does that help with clarification?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed, dear, we can. And
Yes, good morning, everyone. Yes, so, okay, so I'm trying to figure out, you said that the advanced portion, because I think that I need to call the SBA to get more clarification to actually find out if, you know, what I receive falls under the grant or if it stays as the loan. So wouldn't it be best to contact, like, my contact person?
Sure, if you have somebody you're already working with, that's fine. Or like I said, if you want to do Baltimore_DO, just short for district office, at sba.gov, and it'll come into our main box and we can field it to the right folks.
Oh, wonderful. You said Baltimore. Say that again,
yeah,
please,
sure.
Sandra.
Baltimore_DO at sba.gov.
Fantastic. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tia. And we
Tia,
are
this
also
is Deborah. Can you call me when you have a chance? Thank you.
I will, Miss Deborah.
sorry.
Miss Deborah, I absolutely will. Thank you.
Okay.
it's Baltimore. And Tia, if you can open up your chat box, we put in the email address that Rachel was referencing. So it's right
wonderful.
there. And so open up that chat box. And then, of course, as a reminder, we will be sending out all this information, links, phone numbers, email, everything we can. So Rachel, I have a second question. You spoke to some of the things that are included in expenses, and I have a very small question. To move our workforce to remote and to retain them there, we need to invest in some technology, hardware, software, to ensure that we are cyber secure in the work home. Is this do either you or Mark know, is this included as the allowable expense for
Mark can,
PPP?
yeah, Mark can correct me, but it is my understanding that that does count as a piece
Thank
of the newly eligible.
Thank
There
you.
is, there's a port, but again, going back to the point is still 60% has to be used
Oh,
for
yeah,
payroll. And that's what we've been stressing to our customer, our clients and people that ask, make sure that you use that 60% and you can allocate the other portions
Yeah.
accordingly.
Thank you for that clarification, Mark. And, you know, we're trying so hard to remind small businesses, any business that has a workforce working from home, the need for some cybersecurity protection of your client's data, the firm or the business's data. So that was one of the reasons driving my question. Thank you. And so Rachel and Mark are tag teaming, and Mark will let you jump in when you're ready.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Mark Cisnusky, Howard Bank. Thanks for being here. Rachel, great presentation. Secretary Schultz, again, great presentation. I think these are all important things for business owners, people, just to learn about the pandemic. And I've been doing banking for 20 years. And when I first got into banking, we had 9/11 and the crisis that happened there. And then you had the housing crisis about 12 years ago. And every time clients and business customers have learned what's going to be required of them after the fact in banking, things always change. In the housing crisis, we saw lenders get very tight with lending and people didn't have access to credit. I will give the government and everybody credit this time is to be able to put this much money onto the street and into the hands of business owners in an amazing short amount of time is unbelievable. I think early on in April, when we started doing the PPP loans, the first time, I mean, we were giving loans and approving loans, not knowing the process, how forgiveness or all the rules weren't written. And it's still evolving now. So I think people and business owners have to be patient. But with, like, again, the SBA and Secretary Schultz, things that the state has done by forgiving some of the loans and making them grants or trying to improve processes is it's a monumental task. And I think all parties, and I will go back to Howard Bank, I think some of the smaller banks were able to adjust easier because you had individual people there. When you have large institutions, you're trying to move, maybe over 1,000 branches or large branches. When you're local or regional, you only have to work within your footprint and it's easier to meet your clients' needs. So what I've done is part of my presentation is to really talk about what we can take away from the pandemic, what maybe banking might look for, what business owners should do is to maybe help make themselves better prepared the next time. And I think it's all about, even with the PPP loans, people had to prepare documents, payroll records. Now with this second draw, you're having to do financial statements. A lot of business owners don't know so many people were caught unprepared, not being able to locate their 941s. All of a sudden they're working remotely and they didn't have access to those records. So, coming up with contingency plans, knowing your numbers, knowing where your records are kept, being able to access them and being part of that process. So many business owners will tell us when we're meeting them for a loan would be, well, my accountant handles that. Just ask them that question, or my office manager. Well, when this came down to PPP, a lot of times it was the business owners themselves digging into these applications and like, what is a 941? What's my, where do I find that information? How do I calculate these payroll things? What's eligible expenses? So I think the big takeaway number one is have a great rapport with your banker. Get to know them well, have those contacts, not just in bad times, in good times. Really have more conversations with your CPAs and your benefits companies other than once a year when it's time to do taxes. Because during this second draw, if you didn't have great records and you're only having your CPA do your numbers once a year, you weren't able to now provide those comparison reports from 19 to 20. And if you're not using QuickBooks or other accounting methods, or you're not entering it, you're not able to produce those reports. So I think it's important to really take ownership in your business. My wife owns her own small business and I do her QuickBooks and accounting. So, last April, typically March, April, I sit down and I do her whole year at one time. I had no time come April because I was knee deep doing PPP loans. So as soon as that ended, my thing was, let's get the accounting done. We filed an extension, but I was prepared throughout the year. I didn't let that slip. So I was caught up in that myself, my wife being a small business owner, how to do that. So I think being prepared as a business owner. Another thing is what we learned in the last housing crisis, the same with this one. Not being overly leveraged, having savings put aside, learning how to control expenses really help business owners manage this time better than the last time if they were in business. And there's another thing that we always tell people is the time to apply for credit or to do things is necessarily when you don't need it. So clients that had access to lines of credit, the PPP plus the lines of credit or other things help them negotiate the time in between when other grants and different things were available. So again, I think, be prepared to start talking to your bankers. If you have loans, they're going to be looking for renewals or going back for more credit. So I think being prepared to talk with your banker about how you were affected during the pandemic, what you did to cut cost, how you've now improved and you're ready to come out of this stronger, because that's the goal. Can we come out of this as clients and business owners stronger in the future? So I think that's a key for all business owners to take away with this. Again, don't have all your eggs in one basket. Have relationships elsewhere. Establish rapport with other people so that you can, reach out to them should you need assistance. One thing that came up, and I'm going to talk about the idle loans, is as we're talking to clients now, we're still doing lending. We're having people look to buy businesses, expand their business. They were leasing and they felt that, look, I can maybe buy a location. So we have people buying, different buildings and commercial real estate. Part of the process is knowing what you have out there in loans. So we're asking them, what is their PPP loan? Are they applying for a second draw? Are they eligible? Did you get a grant or did you get an idle loan? Because an idle loan, as Rachel stated, is a physical loan that has to be repaid. So even though the payments are deferred right now, that has to be counted in the debt service. One of the things that banks do for business owners is they will file, business owners, a lot of times the loans that you have won't appear on your personal credit. So we will file a lien with the state of Maryland in the form of what's called a UCC. Well, so did the SBA. All those idle loans, UCCs were filed. So the SBA also has a lien on your assets. Well, if you have a loan with another bank and you're looking to move to another bank, typically that bank wants a priority lien on those assets. Not saying that they won't do it going forward with the SBA, but now you have pledged those assets to another bank and to the SBA. So if you're looking to get additional credit while not closing relationships, that may prohibit you from getting loans in the future. They were also, if I'm not mistaken, Rachel, they were personally guaranteed as well. So when you're applying for maybe a mortgage or something else on your credit, it will ask you if you've guaranteed a loan. You may have to list that obligation and should list that obligation as it being out there. So I think it's important to know how to come out of this and how some of these programs will impact you. I think it's important. I'm happy to take questions if they're in the chat box on lending, questions about banking, how to, the SBA PPP process is working. We'll go from there.
So I'm going to, and everybody of course can see the chat box, but first of all, I extend an apology to Jason. I missed his question earlier. And so Jason's question was, is there any assistance for small businesses that started business January 2020? Rachel, Mark?
Yeah, I had jumped in and I did answer in the chat box. I apologize too. I didn't have the chat box up while my slides were up. That's okay. But a business has to have been operating as of February 15th. So as long as you were operational prior to February 15th of 2020, you are eligible to apply.
Thank you, Rachel. Mark, Rachel, another question.
Yeah, well, let me also go on to that. So if you do try to apply for now a first draw PPP, you're going to have to, it's going to be based on your 20 payroll. So having all those reports, and that's what we've seen clients now, because January is typically when payroll reports are finalized, 1099s come out. The CPAs have been busy. So I know some clients that are independent contractors haven't been able to fully file because they haven't received their 1099s, and delays with the postal system may, again, I think people will be filing later, especially the independent contractors for that reason.
Thank you. And Mark, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Nope,
I'm
no, next
sorry.
question.
Another question in our chat box, just to share with everybody in case they don't have access. It says that the forgiven PPP loans are not taxable income. But what if my lender is not allowing me to apply for forgiveness from a loan last June? They keep saying until SBA finishes their forgiveness application, they cannot accept anything. Does that mean I'm going to be paying taxes on it while I file? If so, will I get that amount back once it's forgiven?
Yeah, I attempted to address this in the chat box, and I'll let Mark counter or add on after I get done. I know the applications are there, so I'll apologize. I'm not sure why the lender is saying that, or again, without knowing the loan specifics, I'm not sure what their reasoning is there. I can tell you that SBA has processed over 1.3 million applications for forgiveness. So, with what had happened last year, those folks that have already applied for forgiveness, over $170 billion has already been forgiven. So we've processed basically 88% of the applications we've gotten. So again, I would go back to the lender, and ask them, what's going on. Mark, I'll let you
And I can
jump in.
answer that. So being on the lender side, so prime example, I think in the first draw, say Howard Bank, we had about 1,100 loans on PPP. And you're right, probably 80% of them were under that 150 level. So go back to August last year with legislation, and we all kept hearing that the SBA or the government, they're going to put CARES Act, they're going to have forgiveness, and they're going to change the rules. And what we learned back on PPP that started in April, every time they put more money into the program, things got changed along the way. And the advice that I gave all of my business clients, and I still give them this today, is applying for forgiveness the minute that it's ready may not be in your best interest, because I have a feeling things are going to change, and they have. Originally, the idle advance was taxable. So we wound up booking some loans that had idles, and they had small PPP loans. Now that's all been forgiven, and there's going to be a process on the back end to take that out. So a lot of banks have held off on forgiveness on certain levels or different things because it's so hard if you're using a portal to every time have to go back and make changes, or retroactive go back then for a loan that's forgiven, maybe to adjust or make changes. So I know for us at Howard Bank, any loans that were under that 150 mark, because you still had time to apply for forgiveness because the cover period hadn't ended, there was no payments, the bank had made the decision to hold that off, work on the loans that were larger because that legislation really hadn't changed. And then if you're a big institution, we may have done 1,100, but some of your larger regional banks would have done like 35,000 or 40,000. So it's a matter of prioritizing the loan size and how they're doing it. And again, what we're reading is that by the end of this week, I think the PPP process for the SBA will be updated in the portal to allow those applications with the guidance changes. Because every time they change guidance, they have to make adjustments to the portal. And then we in turn have to make our portal, comparable so that it can share data and be forgiven. So once that's done, and that's all the banks are going through this process. But no, you have plenty of time. Like I said, we do it, and I answer those questions from my clients all the time. So again, having that rapport with your lender, they may not be giving you all the information, but I think it's good for people to hear this. Yes, but I know a lot of clients that still have large loans and they haven't received forgiveness opportunities. So we're prepared, but then also the same people that would review the applications for forgiveness are the same people now that are reviewing the second draw. So second draw is kind of taking priority over the forgiveness. So
What a great answer. That was a great answer. Elizabeth, did that help you? I hope so. Well, thank you. I
Great.
hear over and over that relationship and how important that is. So the next question we have, oh, and Elizabeth said thumbs up. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Mark. So thumbs up, we got it.
I eat, sleep, drink, PPP.
Thank you. We have another question, and Deborah, you may want to jump in and help with this. Are businesses eligible for the second round PPP if they received a grant or loans from the first round and exceeded 25% reduction in gross receipts received? So, Deborah, you may need to provide some clarity because I don't think
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yes, if I can provide some clarity. We applied for the second round of PPP, and I included the grants that I received as income, and that took me over the revenue eligibility requirement. It took me over that 25% for that quarter. And therefore, I interpreted that to be that I am not eligible for this second round of PPP because I counted my grants as income from the previous one. So I just want to make sure that that is accurate.
I mean, Rachel, I don't think, I mean, if it's a grant, I don't.
I was going to let Mark take the lead on this one, but it was my understanding that you don't count the loan, that doesn't count against you, let's say. I think you need to reapply. I think you need to adjust your numbers.
Adjust it, because what I've seen a lot of clients do, and where we
certainly not the grants for sure.
No,
yeah,
right. Grants and even the PPP, because it's not taxable. So again, goes back to what I said, is understanding your how to so again, keeping accurate records and inputting into your books is really key. So just recognizing that as top line revenue when it's not, it's not a revenue. It's an other income, it's a grant, but you don't necessarily show it that way. And I think that's important to maybe look at it, because again, it's not being mishonest, and you can check with your CPA or accountant to do that, as we always advise. Again, that's where it goes back to having that person where you can make that call. But from a revenue, it's not a true revenue number. It's not.
Okay, well, you answered my question, and I will go back and I will push that button. Thank you. That was my question.
And same like an idle loan. If you got an idle loan, you borrowed money. It's a liability. It's not an asset. It's not revenue. It shows up on the balance sheet, but it's not going to show up as revenue.
Okay, so it's other income. Got it. Thank you.
And yeah, Angie, I'll just jump back in here if I can. Just 2 points, much to Mark's point of keeping your record keeping and being very diligent on how you're tracking things. It is possible for a small business to have one, or now maybe even two, paycheck loans, an EIDL loan, even a traditional SBA 7A loan. So you can have all of these things kind of working in your favor at the same time. The big thing here is really keep careful records. You need to make sure that the money you're spending with your EIDL, what you're using your EIDL for, those expenses must be different from your paycheck. So you can pay payroll from March to June with your paycheck loan, and you can pay payroll from September to November with your EIDL loan. You just need to be very careful about your bookkeeping on all of this. And the other point that I will throw out, we talked a good bit about forgiveness. I just want to make sure folks understand they are eligible for the second draw, even if you've not been forgiven yet. So the person that was with us, I believe it may have been Elizabeth, concerned that she's not been forgiven yet, you still can, as long as you have exhausted those funds and they have been spent, again, you have less than 300 employees and you can prove that 25% reduction, you're able to go ahead and apply for that second draw. So I know it's so much coming at everybody. And like Mark said, you just ask for help. That's what we're all here for. So.
That was a great response. Thank you, Rachel. And again, what I really hear from you guys is building these relationships with our lender, having a connection, seeking help. None of us are above it. We all need to do it. So that's great. I don't see, and maybe, I'm missing a question, but I think we got all the questions in the chat room, but I would like to say, Joanne says, yes, we did. Awesome.
job.
Thank you. Yeah.
Perfect.
And now, is there anybody else who has a question, whether it's in the chat room or not, it doesn't matter. Do you have a question you'd like to ask? All right, I am not going to take that to mean that you did everything. You answered all the questions in the world, but you started a dialogue. You gave us information that's current, updated, very, very relevant. And, from to Secretary Schultz and her team who helped get her here to share information, and Mark, Howard Bank, Rachel, SBA, what you've really done is put a human to a lot of what we read and the confusion in sometimes what we read. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for being here today. We'll get this information out to everybody. It is 9:46. We did it.
Hey,
That's really great. That's
I usually talk forever on video things, so good to put me last.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for being here today, and to all the small business owners that are here, thank you for joining us. Clay, do we have any webinars that you want to mention as a coming up next before we conclude?
Yeah.
I have
I gotta
so
find
many.
gotta find
Where
the
do we
unmute
start?
button for myself. That unmute button is tricky sometimes. We have a BBB webinar on the 17th for, it's actually a Google live stream, Work Smarter this year with Google's productivity tools. And on the 9th, actually, next week, we'll have a webinar hosted by me talking about some new Better Business Bureau tools that are coming to our accredited business community. So I'll include those in the email, and keep an eye out for my message.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you all so much. Please keep your eye out for BBB webinars, and to, again, our panelists, and your time this morning, incredibly valuable to us. Thanks for making a difference in our lives.
Having us, glad to be here.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all so much. Thank you all. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day. Stay
Thank
safe.
you.
Okay.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah,
Oh.
so appreciate it. I love having you guys. Yes, Clay, sorry.